Hi everyone, welcome back to Mom Meets World. I'm Anjali Usis, founder of Radiant Heart Center VA.
And I'm Kathy Desai-Salter, owner of Vyana Infant Massage.
And today we are so excited to have Dr. Eguiguren with us from Georgetown Hospital. She is an OBGYN and she is going to share a lot of wisdom with us. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
And giving me the opportunity to share.
Yeah.
We're so excited to have you on today.
Thank you.
Yes.
So what do you do? Tell us about your background and kind of what services you provide.
Yeah, so I work in women's healthcare. I am an OBGYN, obstetrics and gynecologist. As an obstetrician, I focus on women's care while they're pregnant. And as a gynecologist, I focus on women's care while they're not pregnant. And this includes preventive health care. I work at MedStar Georgetown Hospital as a general OBGYN.
Cool. That's awesome. And what led you to this work? Did you always know you wanted to be a doctor and then figure out what kind? Or did you just become passionate about women's health?
So I truly think that I have the best job there is in this world. Of course, I'm biased. But the reason I say that is because I get to know people for their lifetime, for a big chunk of their time, and my time. And I really enjoy that day-to-day thing. As an OBGYN, I get to know women from their first gynecological exam and everything that entails, into contraception discussions, sexual education, to preconception, pregnancy, postpartum in many cases, but then also deal with gynecological issues and changes that women go through throughout their lifetime. Yeah. So I love that ability to get to know people throughout their life and establish that long-term relationship with them. And that's what I wake up every morning, and that's what I love to go to work, because I get to have that.
That's awesome.
It also has two parts of medicine that I really enjoy doing, and one of them is sitting down and talking to people, getting to know people, doing my clinical work every day. But I also love the aspect of being able to do surgical management when it's needed. It's a good combination of things that I like.
That's awesome. Mm-hmm. I never really have thought about just the whole trajectory of a woman's health, but it is.
Right, like at every stage.
Yeah.
I mean, your first, like you said, your first appointment, when
oh my
your
God,
period to like menopause potentially, right?
All those changes.
All
those changes.
Right.
And then those are changes that I go through as a woman too. And so that's also a learning, process for me.
That's awesome.
So what are some misconceptions about OBGYNs?
So
there are lots.
There are a lot. So I love that you asked me that question, because hopefully I can negate some of those misconceptions. I do want to start out by saying that as an obstetrician, I would love every woman to have the birth experience that they desire, and only intervene if it is necessary for safety more than anything, and hopefully not at all. Right? That's my goal.
Awesome.
I think the first one that comes to mind that I hear all the time is that obstetricians love to do C-sections, and that we only do C-sections, and we don't allow a vaginal delivery. And I strongly believe that's not the case, because we know all the health benefits and less risks that there are with a vaginal delivery over a C-section. Of course, that's not to say that other circumstances may not lead to a C-section, and I'm thankful that we have that way of delivering babies. And sometimes it's necessary, and sometimes that's the best way to go. But as a whole, we prefer vaginal deliveries.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. That's a good clarification.
Yes.
Yeah, I think along kind of similar lines is that another misconception may be that we don't allow for natural labor to occur.
Uh-huh.
And I do want natural labor to happen, and I promote that. The discussion more becomes when natural labor doesn't happen. And that's when I take time to discuss that with my patients, so we can have some shared decision making and deciding what's the best course of action where we all feel it's the right path and come up with a good plan. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Can I tell you more?
Yes.
So another one that's very important to educate and discuss is that a lot of people think once you have a C-section, it's always a C-section.
Right.
And that's not the case. There are many circumstances where if you've had a C-section before, you could still do a TOLAC, and TOLAC is a trial of labor after a C-section. And in many cases, that's something that really needs to be considered. And again, discussing with each individual, everyone is different as far as preferences, risk factors, and everything that needs to be take into account, but then that discussion can be made so we can decide what's best for that family again.
Cool. I've heard of VBAC, I haven't heard of TOLAC.
So those are very similar terms, just a little bit different. Is TOLAC is the trial, so it's the trial of labor after a C-section.
Okay.
VBAC is once you've had a vaginal birth after a C-section.
Got it.
Some people may also feel or think that exercise is not safe in pregnancy. Again, I promote exercise in pregnancy because that helps you stay healthy throughout life, including pregnancy. And it also helps with the labor, delivery progress, and more so recovery process too.
Yes.
So, exercise.
Yes,
do
up
it.
to exercise.
Of course, talk to your healthcare
Right.
provider. There's some contraindications, but those are not that many.
Okay.
I do also like to talk about the fact that it is a common misconception that if you end up getting induced for a variety of reasons, so induction of labor instead of allowing for natural labor, we'll end up with a C-section. And I have this conversation all the time with my patients because, again, it's a shared decision making. But that's in fact not the case. The majority of people that do get induced will end up with a vaginal delivery. So it's something important, again, for
That's
everyone
very
to
important.
discuss.
I didn't know that.
This is a very good one. So you can get an epidural anytime you want it, if you want it. Everyone's different. Someone wants pain control, other people don't, and that's up to you.
I thought there was a point, like, to where if you progress that much, you can't get an epidural. Is that true?
So really what you have to think about with an epidural is as long as you're able to stay still and in the position that the anesthesiologists want you to be in, it's still safe.
I see.
At the same time, if you've dilated so much that you're close to 10 centimeters, it's probably easier. You'll get rid of the pain quicker by pushing the baby out.
Oh, gotcha.
But you can still get an epidural at any point. Maybe 10 centimeters, maybe let's get the baby out. But anytime before that, as long as you're able to stay still, which becomes, of course, much harder later on.
Yeah.
The other thing, on the other hand, is people sometimes say, don't get it too early, because then that will stall your labor, and that won't be the case. So an epidural will not change your labor course.
Okay.
It may have you push for longer, so that's something to consider,
Yeah.
but then you're not going to be in pain, so again, something to consider. But it won't change the labor course, so if you want it, go for it. If you don't want it, that's fine too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. I like, because, you know, we talk a lot about kind of natural birth and holistic living, and America does have some of the highest C-section rates. We have high maternal mortality rates. And so I love that you are saying, you know, that you believe that, you know, natural birth and natural labor should take its course, and the medical intervention only when necessary. Because I don't know that that's always happens. Sometimes it happens too soon. And then, like in my case, I had to eventually have a C-section, even though I had planned a water birth in the hospital. But because I had a doula who sort of supported me and let me know my options, she said, you know, there are things to have a gentle cesarean. And so that made, like, I feel, even though I didn't have the birth that I wanted, it wasn't traumatic for me, because I know I did everything I knew of beforehand to have a natural birth. I, you know, considered delivering a vaginal breech, but the OB wasn't necessarily comfortable with that. I know that they're not always trained to do that. But like, one of the things my doula said is that you can ask them not to tie your hands down during the C-section. And so I did, and so I was able to, even though the IVs made it hard, I was able to hold her when they put her on my chest, you know? So those things, if I had not known them from my doula, and I wouldn't have known to ask, those would have been some things that maybe made the birth a little bit more traumatic than it was. How many percentage of women have described their birth to be traumatic?
Yeah, so I went to a birth symposium. They say 48% of women consider birth to be a traumatic experience, which is...
It's
way too high.
You know, like, we shouldn't have traumatic. Even if it doesn't go as we planned, it shouldn't be traumatic. And so what should people know in selecting a birth provider, even if it's not an OB and they want to have or not a midwife, they want to have an OB, what questions are they asked, or what do they need to know to pick a provider that will be in line with what they feel?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think just to kind of go back to your experiences and what you mentioned about being a traumatic experience, I think a very important thing is to be open to the provider, whoever it is that you choose, about your fears, about what your concerns or questions are, and your desires.
Yeah.
So this experience is yours or the patient's more than anyone else's.
Yeah.
And I think that part of making that experience better and decreasing the anxiety and having a better experience in general is being open to the provider that you choose and establishing that relationship, because really this is a partnership where we all want this experience to be healthy, but also a good one, right? Understanding that things change and things sometimes don't happen exactly the way that you want them to be. But the more you educate yourself, the more you share that with the providers in your support network, the better that your experience will be, even if it doesn't end up being the same way that you want it to be.
Okay.
I feel like people hold back. I think that there's this misconception that doctors know everything, so people are scared to come in and even ask questions. They feel certain questions are silly or they don't. But I really like what you're saying. It's your responsibility as a patient to really share what you feel, because someone can't help you if they don't know the full story either.
Yeah. As far as choosing the right kind of place for you or provider for you, it is very different, and people have different backgrounds too. So I think, and I like to say that because I have my own background, I have my own biases too.
Yeah.
And so my perspective may be different from other people.
Okay.
I think that partly comes from where I was trained, where I work in a tertiary care center. At the same time, I cannot stress enough how important it is to think about what is important to you as a person, right?
Yeah.
Do you want a big group of people? Do you want a smaller group? Do you want midwives involved? Do you want doctors involved? Who are providing that care, right? And then also be focused on that social network again. Family support, friends. Do you want a doula? What type of support do you want to make this experience better for you?
Okay.
For things like the doula saying, hey, you can ask for a friendly C-section. Gentle cesarean.
Yeah.
The other day, we did a C-section with clear drapes.
Wow.
Where when baby was delivered, mommy can still be part of that and see that. And that was very meaningful for her. I think things to consider are also knowing, if you have any risk factors that may lead to you needing other teams involved, high risk care, potential for, baby needing additional help and having maybe a level 3 NICU. All of those things, and again, people are different and have different backgrounds, but all of those things are things that you should be thinking about and considering.
Right.
When I talk to patients, I think it's a good idea to have them prepare what their expectations are, kind of like a birth plan, kind of prepare for what they would like, so we can discuss and make sure that we're all on the same page, and make sure that there are all reasonable things that we can also accomplish. I also tell people it's kind of like training for something that you've never done before. So it's, again, kind of what we talked about, responsibility. It's also everyone's own responsibility to make this your own experience. And if you've never done something before, how do you prepare for it?
Yeah.
You read books, you talk to people that have done it before, you maybe get into prenatal yoga, you do things that are preparing you for, keeping you healthy throughout pregnancy, but also preparing you for that big day. Sometimes I also love to tell people that it's important to keep an open mind and to be flexible.
Yes.
For example, what happened to you?
Right. It won't always go as planned.
It doesn't always go as planned.
Yeah.
But you stayed empowered. I think that's the main thing.
Yeah.
Very good. Yeah, so you stayed empowered. You
Yes.
voiced those things that were important to you. And maybe
Yes.
your doula was that support
Yes.
to help you share that.
Absolutely. So great.
Sometimes if there's not that communication happening, it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And that leads to, that's not how I would have liked it.
Right.
But then that already happened.
Then you can't do anything.
You can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
So feeling empowered.
Okay.
Feeling that you feel comfortable with the providers and with people that are taking care of you.
Yeah.
But also trusting them, right? Because again, this is a partnership. And we want this to be your experience, but we also think that it's better if you have trust in those that are taking care of you.
Yes, absolutely.
There,
That's critical.
Yeah.
I think that, as the majority of pregnancies and deliveries end up well
Yeah.
with a vaginal delivery that's healthy and happy. But something to consider is that in occasions there are obstetric emergencies.
Yeah.
Something to consider is making sure that the people that are taking care of you feel comfortable with what to do during those obstetric emergencies, where we still want a happy and good outcome.
Yes.
So considering going, into a practice that has that as well is very important. People that feel comfortable doing these, hopefully you will never have to do it or get to have that experience. But if you do, it's going to be much better if you're in the right place.
But I think that's important to hear from an OB, because sometimes moms are kind of shamed or guilted, like, oh, at least you and your baby are healthy. But as we know and we've learned, the birth experience is important. And you don't want to start baby's life and your life as a mother traumatized. That also increases postpartum depression. And so I like that you are saying that it's important that you have the kind of experience. You're open and flexible, but you have the experience that you want. I think that's important for people.
And that you communicate it.
Yes, exactly.
I think that's the big part too.
Yeah.
Is that you're communicating it, that you're able to say fears and really work, because the more you share, the more your provider is able to help you in a partnership versus, okay, sure,
Yeah, and
absolutely.
just going along with it,
It's,
right? Having regrets.
It's that empowerment.
Yes.
It's the shared decision making. Because when things don't go exactly like you envisioned it and you prepared for, because again, it is still important to prepare for that.
Yes.
But then being the open mind of saying, well, if it didn't, what do I need to do? What do I need to say so it's still good?
Yeah.
Even though it wasn't as you thought it would be.
Right.
And that does happen. And I think that's, I do spend some time with my patients to say that. People, sometimes will say something as simple as maybe, I don't want an epidural, for pain control. And that's okay. And we're here for you to support you through that process, to give you anything to equip you well, while you're also training with the yoga, whatever you're choosing to do to try to deal with that. But then I tell people, okay, perfect. Let's plan on that. We're going to do that. But keep an open mind. If that changes and you change your mind at any time, that's okay.
Yeah.
And does that make sense? Kind of what I'm trying to say?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Certain hospitals are known to have higher C-section rates. So do you think that is because the OBs, and I'm not putting everyone in a box, but to say maybe at certain places the priorities aren't empowerment, they aren't having that same partnership that you're talking about. You're also a woman, which I think helps because you've had children, you've had the experience. That's very relatable to you.
Right.
So I don't know if that makes sense, but
yeah, I think that's a great question. I think it's difficult to answer in the sense of I don't know, right? I don't know
you just know your practice.
I don't know. I know my practice. I do know how important it is for people to share, though.
Yes.
And I think I don't encourage, shopping around necessarily, but I do think that as a patient, you have not the right, but the kind of the duty, you owe it to yourself of going to the practice that you choose or wherever you choose to go and see how you feel. Talk about these things and see what is the response you get.
Yeah.
Ask them, is this kind of what your practice, all of you look like? Because we are, for example, my group is a big group.
Okay.
We're 12.
Okay.
So it may be me, maybe someone else that's there.
Right.
So ask them about, is this kind of where you're all at? And of course, everyone's going to have their own individual personalities and preferences, but we do generally are a group practice that
has all the same
common kind of ideas and themes.
And beliefs.
Yeah.
And so can you explain to us what are some challenges that you see families having postpartum or, during?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think we don't talk about it enough. So I think one thing is that people know and families know that their life is going to change once you have a baby.
Right.
But maybe we're not prepared of how much it's going to change.
Okay.
And that's going to be different for different people.
Yes.
It's that fourth stage of pregnancy, right?
Fourth trimester.
Fourth trimester of pregnancy.
Yeah.
That is so important, and we spend so much time from the moment that you find out you're pregnant till that big day, preparing for that day.
Yes.
But sometimes we don't, well, many times we don't focus at all on what comes after. So, okay, you prepare for all this, you have your ideas, your expectations. Sometimes it goes that way, sometimes it goes completely the opposite. But okay, baby's here.
Right.
And now suddenly you have a new life that maybe you didn't prepare as much for. And that's where we see a lot of mental health, or feeling, it's a beautiful new life, but it's also a very overwhelming life. You're recovering from a vaginal delivery or a C-section.
Yeah.
You may or may not be in pain. You're having a lot of emotional changes. You're not sleeping.
Right.
You may choose to breastfeed, and you're breastfeeding, so that's a whole, a lot of work. And then you're also now taking care of this baby that depends on you. And so I think a big challenge is maybe not talking enough about the postpartum period, not having enough of a social support sometimes. A lot of people are talking about the fact that, living here in this area or in the States in general, many people don't live close to their families.
Yes.
And so your mom, your dad, or whoever it is not here for you.
Yeah.
And
Aunt,
so
uncle, cousins, like the whole
everybody
family, they're not around.
that are not around. And so, as part of that kind of prenatal care, start thinking about who is your social network,
Yes.
who is your support system. Surround yourself by them. So hey, I'm gonna call you for dinner one night,
Yes.
or I need to hold the baby for a little bit. I need to go take a nap. I need to take a shower. I need to feel myself. I need to go have some coffee with my friends.
Yeah.
Whatever it is. So that's, I think, something that we're not preparing maybe sometimes people enough, or not talking about it enough, as the postpartum kind of recovery period, the social situation and support. Postpartum depression is it's common, and it's something that it's very important for people to share that,
Right,
to talk about it. Again, kind of going back to that empowerment of being very self-aware of what you're going through, but also sharing it, because sometimes it won't be as obvious for other people. And if you're not sharing with those that love you and that take care of you, but also your providers who are helping you recover, then we can't help. Of course, it's also our responsibility to screen for those things, and that's one thing that we do every time that we see you postpartum, is we will screen for that. But if there's no red flags and you're not sharing it, it's hard to take care of.
Cecilia, can you talk about, so I know that sort of traditionally the first appointment after baby is 6 weeks, and that has since changed, right, to
3 weeks.
3 weeks. Can you talk a little bit about that change and what prompted it?
So I think a lot of it is this the recovery process as far as the mental health goes.
Mm-hmm.
By 6 weeks, sometimes a lot of concerns or issues can be a little bit caught late.
Yes.
So we want to try to catch those earlier. Also the normal recovery process, right? Make sure that pain is under where it should be, that you're not having any warning signs that we should catch earlier. I think another one is, the maternity leave is another, huge stress for people. All that kind of monetary aspect also, again, kind of goes back to that support system.
Yeah. And you're from Ecuador. Can you share what postpartum is like?
Yeah.
So very different. I didn't have my kids in Ecuador. I had them here.
Okay.
But luckily all my family traveled over here. Stayed with me for like 6 months. Not all at once, but yes. Over, in Ecuador and a lot of other countries, not only your mom and your dad and your close family members are there, but it's a huge network. And sometimes it can be a little overwhelming too, but that's really an amazing support that you have other places, just because of all the changes that we're going through.
Absolutely.
And then you're not alone, and you have someone cooking for you, another one
Taking
holding
care
the baby,
of your other child.
the other child,
taking care of the house stuff, another one taking care of you.
Yes, and so that is very different. That's one thing that when I was pregnant, I had my baby, my mom was like, okay, so we're going to divide and conquer here. I'm going to go for a month, and your mother-in-law's going to go for another month. And, I don't know if I could have done it without them.
Right.
And so that's why I always, again, stress the importance of having that social network. Where over there, or in other countries, it may be just like automatic.
Right. It is, and a lot. We did a show all on universal postpartum care, and it's in one country, there's 14 people who hold a baby every day. Because it's what is supposed to happen. It's too much for one person. And so I'm so glad you're saying the things you are, because it's so important for people to think about those things in pregnancy. We had someone on the show who said people prepare for the wedding and then they forget they're going to be married for the rest of their lives.
It's the same thing.
It's the
same thing.
It's just, you focus so much on this thing. I always say birth is an episode and then you're a parent for a lifetime. But we focus so much on this because maybe we're not talking to our provider or other people about what our fears are, what we're nervous about, so that we can kind of dispel them and get them, get advice or whatever. We're holding on to those. So people focus so much on that without preparing for what's to come. Yeah. And for me personally, the 4th trimester was the hardest by a lot.
And many times it is that way.
Yeah.
It is the case where sometimes even people that are very, you're probably that way too, but that you're self-sufficient in the sense of you do a lot of things and independent and multitasker, and you feel like you got it all figured out.
Yeah.
And many times that's when you're like, whoa,
that's the biggest,
I have no idea what I'm doing.
You don't practice slowing down.
Oh, and actually that's a good point to say too, is it's okay if your bonding experience is not what you expected it to be.
Right,
yes. So true.
Or beautiful even.
Yes,
right? You have this idea in your mind, you're gonna love the little baby.
Yeah.
This little baby's beautiful, but it's doing a lot of things that are not making it so beautiful.
Well, and I think, so we mentioned how they say that life is beautiful, right? So it is beautiful. It is also brutal, and I think motherhood is beautiful, and I feel like
that's Glennon Doyle.
Yes. And I feel like because we don't live in communities in America, 4th trimester and motherhood is more brutal and less beautiful. You know what I'm saying? Because we don't have a support system to help us just live, eat, sleep, clean, host. And so we don't really get to enjoy baby as much. We don't get to sit down and massage baby and bond with baby and show them the world and teach them about life, because we have to clean and cook and host and go back to work and pay bills. And so it is brutal, but maybe it could be a little bit less brutal if we had more of a community.
Well, and I think that's something that, good job to you, because you are building that community and social network, and I think that's what we need to do more.
Yeah.
And open up our hearts more to more people.
Yes,
and build that community.
Build that community, yes.
Absolutely. So to summarize, can you just let us know bullet points of what you shared?
Sure. So I think very important points that we talked about today was feeling empowered.
Yes.
That this is a partnership relationship between your provider and yourself as a patient. Sharing what is important to you, and also trusting your provider.
Yes.
Right? Yes. Also preparing for the postpartum.
Yes.
Surrounding yourself with social network, with your support system. Feeling comfortable. Where you have chosen to be.
Yes.
Important aspects to consider.
Yes.
And keeping an open mind and being flexible that things may not end up like you want them to be. But again, with that empowerment, that will help you, that even if those things do change, it will still be a good experience for you.
Yeah.
And I do feel like as an OBGYN, I also have to say, considering that, that wherever you choose to go is well equipped to handle obstetric emergencies in the event that they happen, and hopefully that will never happen.
Yes.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much. If you want to learn more about Dr. Eguiguren, she is at Georgetown Hospital. Her information is below. We'd love for you to comment. If you were listening, share one of the misconceptions that were listed by Cecilia. And follow us on Facebook, Instagram. We would love to hear from you. We would love to be part of your community. And as they say, ain't no hood like the motherhood. Bye. See you next time.